This is the incredible story of tragedy, loss, and friendship between a woman and a chance encounter with an elephant. Chloe always dreamed of working with animals. Ever since she was a little girl, she had imagined traveling the globe helping wildlife in need. But her dreams were brought crashing down when she failed biology in high school. She had lost her chance to study veterinary science at university, and she felt hopeless and in despair. But all was not lost. Whilst deciding what she wanted to do after graduating high school, she decided to take a year out and go on an adventure. It was an adventure that would change her life forever, and change the life of another individual as well. Chloe had visited Botswana when she was younger. Her parents had taken her and her brother on a safari to the Great Okavango Delta when she was 12 years old. It was the trip of a lifetime. They canoed the waters at sunrise, watching in awe as a herd of elephants came down to the still, peaceful waters to drink. They heard the roar of the lions at nighttime and the constant singing of the crickets as they drifted off to sleep. In Botswana, Chloe had felt truly alive. So, in her gap year, she now decided to visit the great continent once more. But this time, she opted for Kenya. She couldn't afford to travel far and wide as she had hoped, but instead, she secured a 12-week voluntary conservation position in Kenya's Greater Masai Mara Reserve. It was a very hands-on experience. Chloe was up before sunrise with the rangers each morning. Some days were spent patrolling the perimeter, searching for signs of illegal entry and poaching. Other days were spent tracking the wildlife, and others spent conducting vegetation surveys to make sure the habitat was thriving for the thousands of species that relied upon it. Chloe soon got into the swing of things, and she fitted right in. She learnt more in those 12 weeks than she had in her entire lifetime so far. But one morning, as her alarm clock screamed into life, Chloe didn't realize that her life was about to change forever. She got dressed and walked to the mess tent where the rangers gathered. She poured herself a mug of the hot, milky, sweet chai that she had grown to love and went to make herself some toast. But before she could take a bite, the head ranger came running in. There had been an incident during the night. Gunshots had been heard, and a family of elephants had been targeted by poachers. Chloe ran to the Land Rover and jumped in. The team of rangers were all armed. Their eyes were wide as they scoured the thick vegetation. The vehicle bumped and lurched over the heavily rutted track. Chloe braced herself for every jolt and held on tightly. Finally, after what seemed like an age and just as the sun was rising above the horizon, they came to a halt. Chloe and the rangers stepped out of the Land Rover. It was eerily quiet all around them. The shapes from trees and bushes cast dark shadows on the ground. Then there was a sound. It was the sound of squelching mud. The head ranger shone his flashlight ahead of them and raised his rifle, and that's when they saw it. At first, Chloe didn't know exactly that they were looking at. It was a lump lying on the ground, writhing around in the mud. When Chloe looked a little harder, inching closer with the group of rangers, she could see that it was an elephant calf. It was clearly in pain. Every now and then it let out a distressed honking sound. Cautiously, the rangers moved closer. Chloe knelt down beside it. She could hear its breathing. She could smell the sweet scent on its breath. Chloe reached out slowly and touched the side of its face. The baby lying on its side in some thick mud. All around it were the footprints of its family, and then, just a few yards away, was the devastating sight of a female adult. She was unmoving, her eyes closed, her body still. She had been shot in the skull 2 or 3 times. The poachers had struck again, but they had been spooked by the patrols and had left without taking her tusks. The kill was a massive loss for the park and an even greater loss for the close-knit elephant family. She had been destroyed senselessly, and Chloe felt a lump growing in her throat. She realized that this herd of elephants were the ones she had seen only 3 days before during one of her patrols. The rangers knew them all individually. For them, it was a tragic moment. Some of them had known the adult from a youngster. Looking back at the distressed calf, the rangers could tell that she had been injured during the ordeal. The entire herd had fled in a panic when the first shots rang out. It looked as though the baby had been trampled and now lay on the ground, unable to get up. Chloe felt an overwhelming sense of desperation for the little calf. The rangers called the veterinary team. When the vets arrived, the rangers headed off. There were leads to follow and paperwork to be filled out, but Chloe wanted to stay. She couldn't bear leaving the calf lying in the mud, crying out for its mother. She stayed next to it, speaking softly whilst stroking its skin. The elephant looked her directly in the eyes, and Chloe could see her own reflection looking back at her. Chloe could see every tiny detail on the baby's face: the wrinkled skin, the long eyelashes, the pink tongue. The vets determined that the baby had internal bleeding and possibly a cracked rib cage. She was also battered and bruised. Even if the rest of the herd came back for her, in all likelihood she wouldn't be able to get up on her own and would die from her injuries. If she was to live, then they would have to take her to the nearby vet clinic to treat her for her injuries. Whilst the veterinary team waited for a tractor to be brought to the scene to help lift the baby elephant into the back of their pickup truck, Chloe waited by the elephant's side. She tried to give it some water, but the calf refused. Chloe felt helpless. Then the baby reached up with its trunk and ruffled Chloe's hair. It was smelling her all over, bringing its trunk down around Chloe's neck and then across her face. Chloe couldn't help but smile. When the tractor arrived, the team worked tirelessly to comfortably lift the baby elephant using a series of ricochet straps. When the baby was safely in the back of the truck, the team headed towards the exit of the park. Chloe sat with the calf, still comforting her, still talking gently to her and stroking her on the forehead. When they reached the gates of the park, Chloe had to get out. She gave the calf one more look and then jumped out of the truck before returning to the ranger station. It had been a tough day for the team, and it was something that Chloe never forgot. When she returned to the UK after her trip, the baby elephant was all that she talked about. But for Chloe, life went on. She made it into university, studying zoology, and then got an apprenticeship as a veterinary nurse. 10 years after rescuing the baby elephant, an opportunity came up for Chloe again. It was a trip back to Kenya. There was a veterinary conference in Nairobi for 3 days. Immediately, Chloe's thoughts turned to the elephant calf. She got on the plane and ventured back to Africa. After the conference, she hired a car and drove to the northeastern outskirts of the Masai Mara. She pulled up at the reserve reception where she had been 10 years ago. Although none of the rangers she knew from before were still working there, Chloe was welcomed with open arms. She was escorted to the ranger station where she told them her story from 10 years before. One of the rangers had a broad smile on his face and he nodded. "Come with me," he said, patting Chloe on the back. Chloe followed him, and the two of them climbed into a Land Rover. They drove over the dusty, rutted tracks, the acacia thorns scraping the side of the vehicle as they zoomed past. After half an hour, they came to a clearing, and there, standing in the open, was a herd of elephants. Chloe felt so happy to be back there once more. But there was more to come. Something incredible was about to happen. The ranger moved the vehicle closer to the herd before bringing it to a standstill, the engine quietly ticking over. Then he pointed. Chloe followed his gaze. One of the smaller elephants had its back to them. Then it lifted its trunk into the air and turned around. This female wasn't yet fully grown, but it was by no means a baby. The elephant took a few paces towards Chloe and then stopped. She brought her trunk up in front of her once more. "She is smelling you," the ranger said. The elephant then walked forwards again. This time it was quicker. Chloe held her breath. Was this really the little calf she had helped all those years ago? The elephant kept on coming and didn't stop. She walked straight up to the side of the Land Rover. Chloe stared into her eyes, seeing her reflection once more, and the long eyelashes and grey, wrinkled skin. The elephant carefully lifted its trunk and ruffled Chloe's hair, just as she had done so 10 years earlier. She then sniffed Chloe's face, touching her gently with her trunk. Chloe gasped, and her eyes filled with tears. This really was the little calf she had met 10 years ago on that tragic day. She couldn't believe that the elephant would remember her after all this time. The elephant had seen hundreds of people in her lifetime, but she had remembered Chloe. Chloe was lost for words. She hadn't known if the little calf had made it. It was still receiving treatment when Chloe left her volunteer post to return to the UK, and she never heard anything afterwards. It felt as though her heart would burst with pride when she saw just how big and healthy her favorite elephant was now. That chance encounter had changed Chloe's life forever. Never again would she look at animals in the same way. It's true what they say, an elephant never forgets.